So now, about what time? Now I know that the group didn't stay together. Certain people began to leave. I know that Princey Poor left at one time, and other things began to happen. That people began to leave, and the band went. I guess it dwindled. What happened in that period of time when the dwindling of the band began to happen, and who started taking over as the adults started to leave, or they weren't there anymore?
It's a wonderful question. When they had made a decision, when the leadership had made a decision for certain people to leave Hashabah, Israel, in Brooklyn and end up go to South America, the drummers went, and so that pretty much left 539 without any drummers.
Right.
Maury Hoshea purchased some drums. I remember these drums. They didn't have tuning lugs. It was just a skin that had thumbtacks around the edges of them.
I remember those drums.
And
I seen those drums.
you would take sterno fuel, you would heat up a little can of fuel, and you would turn them upside down, and you would have to turn in a circle in order for the note, the key, to go higher and higher. But as you beat the drum,
It dead.
it would go low and low.
Right.
And so him and Adon Mishadet Naaman, a lot of people may not remember, but Mishadet Naaman was a drummer with Maury Hoshea and the crew after that. So the crew after that was Maury Hoshea, Adon Naaman, myself, Omar Ben Gavedi Mania, Ashriel Ben Cohen Levy, Abshalom Ben Nasi Barak, Yekesquiel Kakan, Kashum Ben Gavero Ra. That was the next crew right after the original drummers left and went to Guyana. And that was a whole nother sound. We tried to emulate what they did, but it was entirely different and too fast. Those brothers had a style that was even keeled, where the elders, the men, the women, the children appreciated the music that was coming out. The next crew, all of us were young kids. We just wanted to get out there and do our thing. We was boom, 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 boom. And the elders couldn't keep up. They were sitting down like, wow, it was another sound.
Right.
I remember it. It was another sound. And we tried to replicate the sound that those brothers created, but it was another sound. It wasn't the same. I'm just being honest.
That's a nice way to say we weren't good.
It wasn't the same. I mean, the drums, you got to remember, the bass drums were all on stands with the original crew.
Right.
The next crew, all the drums were on the floor. We didn't have any stands. And we were just trying, and we had a lot of young people. And so we geared the music towards the young people, and we kind of lost the adults. We lost the elders. And so it was different. That's all I can tell you. It was when you hear the sound, and there are tapes out there, when you hear the sound from the original drummers to the next crew, it was like when the drummers left, I was probably 8 years of age, 7 or 8 years of age.
Right.
And now I'm the new drummer. You know what I mean? So I don't know nothing about no tempo, and I just know how to get on there and make a bunch of sounds.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
My crew knows the same thing. And so it was just entirely too fast. It wasn't noisy. It was just too fast. And so the sound was lost. And once those drummers, we all disbanded in the early 80s, and Hashabah had closed its doors. The original Hashabah had closed its doors. The sound was lost for a little while.
So at what point, the next question, because someone had to be able to retain the sound or remember it and keep it in mind. Because if Hashabah closed his doors, I guess people went their separate ways, but at some point, someone brought it back. Can you explain that process to me?
Sure. Most notably, Ashriel Ben Cohen Levy, from my early teenage years, he was the closest person I could remember. We remember the sound that was there in the beginning. And I, and Cohen Shape Me Out, we all lived in Queens at the time, and we would go between each other's homes and practice. Again, the sound wasn't there because now the sound is gone. It's gone to Guyana. We didn't have anything to go off of. In 1988, Ashriel Ben Cohen Levy made transition. And that was very detrimental in the whole entire Israelite community. He was loved, well-respected son of Cohen Levy. And I remember going to Cohen Levy's house in Queens and Cohen Shape just finding all these tapes. And then he was like, listen to this one. And we put it in a little tape recorder. Now, I know a lot of our children may not know what a tape recorder is.
Right.
But it was an instrument to record voice, sound, so on and so forth. And you had a little tape deck or tape box, and you would put the tape in and you would record that way, and you can play it back over and over again. Sometimes you play it so much it'll pop, and then you got to tape it back together. However, we listened to these tapes and Ashriel made transition in 1988. We're listening to tapes from 1975, 1976, 1974. And we're not only hearing the messages that are being given, but we hear the sound of the drums. We hear the sound of the singing, That was a very, very vital vein that pretty much got revived in my heart and in Cohen Shape's heart.
Right.
And it used to be me, Shape, and Ash practicing, and over time, Quetmiel, his family was coming to Cohen McEl's mother's house in the 80s for Shabbat service. So he ended up coming to Queens, practicing up with us. My cousin Zakar eventually started coming back around, and he started coming to Queens and practicing. And of course, the rest of the drummers are Cohen Levy's sons or grandsons. And so, we had to weed out who was a good drummer. Some of them weeded themselves out because they was like, I'm not dealing with that. I'm just an occasional drummer. And so it went from 3 and then to 2, where Cohen Shape and I would take a Yom Rishon and go to each other's houses and rehearse, to increase to 4, 5, 7, and 2 females. A lot of people don't know this, but Kokavia was the original and still is the original tambourine player. But a lot of people don't know that Keturah David, which is Chief Naftali's sister, she was our original singer, backup female singer. So she was originally a part of the Hashabah, the revival of the Hashabah drummers in the late 80s. So that's how it shifted from the Hashabah drummers, the originals, and then went to the next generation, still on 539 Belmont, but some years had passed. I want to say a good 8 to 10 years. And then we just, we started hearing these music from different tapes. I remember the tapes because my father was the chief recorder. My father was the chief recorder. He was Sarah Nathaniel Ben Benyamin. He was the recorder. He's right behind Cohen Levy. And so I heard those tapes, on a weekly basis. But when Cohen Shape pulled them out and you would hear the different messages, but also the music behind it, it was very instrumental, and it touched our hearts. And it was like, in honor of Ashriel, we was going to keep the music of Hashabah Israel alive.
So we talking late 80s, 88, 89. At what point did you say you started to get drummers? People started coming in, people started weeing themselves out. You mentioned yourself and Cohen Shape, but can you mention, this is for historical purposes, so can you just mention who were some of the drummers that when you guys revived the Hashabah Yisrael drummers, who were some of those drummers that were there? And you
Absolutely.
mentioned Akwedmiel also.
Absolutely. Well, when we first started out, it started just Cohen and I, and then when I transitioned from worshiping at Benyamin back to Hashabah in Queens at Cohen Mikael's mother's house, it started out three of us: myself, Cohen Shake, and Akwetmiel. And then it branched off to my cousin Zakar. Zakar didn't want to just sing anymore. He wanted to play the drums. And so
Right.
the best thing to do with him was he couldn't play all the drums at the time. He wasn't versatile like that. He could hold the bass beat. So we put him on the bass. Shemaiah was another. Shemaiah Ben Mori Hoshea was another drummer. He was from his youth a part of the drum crew. We alternated between him and Cohen Levy's other son, Rockleah. Rockleah would like to play, but then Rockleah sometimes he was like he didn't want to play, and
Right.
so we found out that Natia not only could sing, but Natia knew how to play the drums. So we brought Natia on. Meanwhile, we started out with like 3-4 drums. So in order to accommodate more drummers, because our minds was thinking about the original drummers, how many drums did they have?
Right.
We wanted to emulate them, and so we needed more drummers. So we had to figure out a way how we were going to pay for more drums. So we started selling incense and oils after Shabbat,
Right.
and the more money we made, then we started recruiting more drummers because we needed more drummers to fill those seats.
Right.
Chief Mekubaja, Irania, and Old Tanu, they were very young at that time, maybe 7, 8 years old, I believe Meku might have been. And so they weren't drumming quite yet. So at that time, and I want to say 1989, it was myself, Cohen Sheikh Mia, my cousin Zakar, Akwet Miel, Natia, Shemaiah, and Rockleah. By the time we transitioned to Linden Boulevard, which was about 1990, we added Otanu, Chief Mekubaja, and Mori Irania.
Okay.
And that was the core at that time.
How were practices at that time?
But I was on them. One of the reasons why more so coming from my uncle, but I watched it in the Hashaba drummers was practice make perfect. My uncle would leave me in his apartment, tell me what he wanted me to do, but he would leave his wolf dog in the bathroom. And that I couldn't stand dogs.
Right.
And so it would frighten me to make sure I did everything he told me. So I had to roll. I had to constantly do my rudiments. Everything he told me I needed to do, I had to do that. And so when we came along, I knew, and this was a conversation Cohen Levy had with me, being a Misharade at the time. He told me, he said, y'all are up here with us, so y'all got to make us look good. And I took that to heart, and so we couldn't just get up there and make noise. We were not trying to make noise. Just want everyone to know, we practice, I would say 2 to 4 times a month, depending on if we had money to get to where we needed to go. That was the
Right.
first. The second thing is, if you didn't practice as a group, you practiced at home. When I got home every day from work or school, I turned on the cassette player. I didn't have any earphones. I was living in the projects at the time. I would turn the volume up. I would listen to the tapes of Principal and them. I would listen to other artists, and I would go at it. And so by Shabbat, when I saw them, we played through the service. We had the first half of the service. And I would hear the mess ups, the skips, the too fast, too slow. You know, somebody did something they wasn't supposed to do. Cohen Levy's looking at me. At least that's how I felt, and my ear was sharp. And by lunch break, it was go eat your lunch. You got 45 minutes to eat your lunch, and we got a 2-hour practice, especially in the summertime when the summers were long. Because I didn't have money at the time to be going back to the Bronx and coming back to Queens. And I couldn't do all that. So the thing was, we got 2 hours on Shabbat, man, 20, 30 minutes rolling. Oh, you messed up rolling? We going back to rolling again. Oh, you messed up as a crew? We going back 25 minutes. They got tired of that. I mean, it could be almost an hour. They were just rolling. We wasn't into no playing, rehearsing. It was about self-control.
Execution.
Execute the way, and it wasn't where we had 3-4 guys going off. We didn't even have 3 guys playing lead congas. Aquemio played bongos. Who at the time played 1 drum. I was the only one with 2 drums. So Akar was on lead bass, Natia was on second, Shemai was on third, Cohen Shape was on timbales. So there was no, all of the drums sound the same, we all playing the same. It wasn't like that. Right. Everybody had to play their role. Quetmio could not come off of those bongos. That was his job.
Right.
And if he played anything other than holding a bongo sound, and there's a sound that a bongo has, a Quetmio, he perfected that over time. Chief Meku, all of them. So it was, we worked hard. Yes, I worked them hard.
But that's okay because they turned out to be pretty good. They turned
Absolutely.
out to be pretty legendary, and they in their own rights,
Right.
They turned out to be pretty the work that you and Cohen Shape put in definitely paid off, and I guess inspired by Ashriel. I never got a chance to meet him, I never met him, so I always hear about him. I hear about, everyone loved him just like you said, and that no one knew Sheikh could play the timbales, and he just picked up the sticks. And I guess at home he was soaking in everything, I guess he was
Cohen
soaking
really
everything.
picked up the timbales after Ash passed.
After Ash, yeah. After he passed, yeah, that's what I heard.
He always played timbales.
Right.
Ash he played the bass, or he played timbales. He never played lead. So he left that to me and Cohen Shape. But Cohen Shape and I learned all of the drums. And we made sure we pushed each other to master all of the drums. And when Ashriel made transition, Cohen pretty much stepped into his shoes and actually stepped up to the plate and almost, I'll say almost, became Micaiah, because Micaiah is the original Micaiah. There's nobody better than him. But Cohen Shape picked up that mantle and he ran with it. And when I tell you, and when I hear Cohen Shape play, when I say play, and I'm on congas, he sends chills through my spine. When we really playing, not the showmanship, I'm talking about when we playing heart and soul, that Shape really touches my soul. And that's when you listen to me, Kaya play back in the 70s with Principal.
Them rolls was clean and them rim shots.
but him and Principal play so well together.
Off each other, right?
Off of each other. Right. And it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to tell you something, I want you to repeat it back. I'm telling my story, now tell your story. And that's the way it was, man. And that's what Cohen Shaik and I created with each other, but all of the other brothers, Zakar, Natia, Shemaiah, Quetmiel, Meku, they helped to bring all of that sound. It wasn't a Sheikh and Zadok show. Don't ever think that. It was never a Sheikh and Zadok show. We did that as a team, as a body of young